When my son Hayden said, "Dad, we're not bringing the grandkids to that dump you call home anymore," I simply nodded and smiled. By Christmas morning, I had completely rewritten their lives. And that was just the beginning. For 15 years, I had quietly supported my 3 adult children through college, house down payments, and countless emergencies. I lived modestly in what they called my sketchy little neighborhood, while they built their picture-perfect suburban lives. But when my daughter Ashley declared, "We can't be seen in that area," what would our friends think? I realized they had no idea who they were really dealing with. They thought they were dismissing some out-of-touch old man, living paycheck to paycheck. They were about to learn that their poor father owned one of the most exclusive properties in the state. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Brett Mitchell, and for the past 20 years, I've watched my children transform from grateful kids into entitled adults. After my wife Patricia passed away 5 years ago, I thought my relationship with Hayden, Ashley, and Brandon would grow stronger. Instead, it crumbled faster than a house of cards. Hayden, my oldest at 32, works as a sales manager and lives in a cookie-cutter McMansion with his wife Kelly and their 2 kids. Ashley, 29, married a lawyer named Connor and constantly brags about their sophisticated lifestyle. Brandon, the baby at 26, just bought his first house with money I lent him for the down payment. I raised these kids to value character over cash, hard work over handouts. Their mother and I sacrificed everything to give them opportunities we never had. Patricia worked double shifts as a nurse while I built my consulting business from our kitchen table. We drove used cars, shopped at thrift stores, and lived paycheck to paycheck for years. Also, our children could have better lives. When Patricia got sick, I paid for the best treatments money could buy. After she passed, I thought my children would understand the sacrifices we made. Instead, they seemed embarrassed by my simple lifestyle. "Dad, you really need to upgrade your living situation," Ashley would say during our monthly phone calls. "That neighborhood is going downhill. The houses look so old and tired," Hayden added whenever I suggested they visit. "The kids would be safer at our place." Brandon was the worst. "Dad, I hate driving through those narrow streets. Can't you find somewhere more modern?" The breaking point came during Thanksgiving dinner at Hayden's house. I had driven an hour to spend the holiday with my family, bringing homemade desserts just like Patricia used to make. During dinner, Hayden's wife Kelly made an announcement. "Brett, we've been thinking," Kelly said, not even looking at me. "It would be so much easier if you just came here for holidays from now on. The kids are more comfortable in familiar surroundings." Plus, Ashley chimed in, "Connor's parents live in Westfield Estates. It's just more appropriate for family gatherings." I felt my chest tighten. "What's wrong with my home?" Brandon laughed. "Dad, come on. You live in that rundown area with all those tiny houses crammed together. It's not exactly family-friendly." "We're not trying to hurt your feelings," Hayden said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But our friends might drive through there by accident. It's embarrassing." Ashley nodded eagerly. "Exactly. Last month, Connor's colleague got lost and ended up on your street. He said it looked like low-income housing." That's when Ashley delivered the final blow. "Honestly, Dad, we're trying to build respectable lives here. We can't keep making excuses for why we never host family events at your place." I smiled and set down my fork. I understand completely. They had no idea they were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. The drive home took me through downtown, past gleaming office buildings where I'd once worked 80-hour weeks. As I turned into my embarrassing neighborhood, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. My children thought they knew everything about money and success. They measured worth in square footage and postal codes. What they didn't know was that their poor father had been playing a very different game for the past 20 years. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at my modest 2-story house. To anyone driving by, it probably did look ordinary. The gray siding was simple, the yard was neat but not manicured, and the whole place had a comfortable, lived-in feeling. But appearances can be deceiving. Inside, I poured myself a scotch and opened my laptop. Time to remind myself exactly what my children were so embarrassed about. I pulled up the neighborhood association files, property records, and recent sales data. Willowbrook Estates wasn't just any neighborhood. It was one of the most exclusive private communities in the state, hidden behind understated entrances and designed to look like a charming historic district. Every house was built to strict architectural standards, with minimum lot sizes of 2 acres and minimum home values starting at $1.2 million. My tiny house, it sat on 4 acres and was currently valued at just over $2 million. The neighborhood my children found so embarrassing was home to federal judges, Fortune 500 CEOs, and old money families who preferred privacy over flashy displays of wealth. We had a private golf course, a members-only clubhouse, and security that rivaled the White House. But the best part? You had to be personally recommended by 3 current residents and approved by a board review to even purchase property here. The waiting list was currently 7 years long. Hayden's McMansion was worth maybe $400,000. Ashley's sophisticated suburban home might reach $350,000 on a good day. And Brandon's starter house, the one I helped him buy, was worth about $200,000. Combined, all 3 of my children's homes were worth less than my embarrassing property. But the real kicker was what they didn't know about dear old Dad's financial situation. While they thought I was scraping by, I was actually sitting on investments worth more than $8 million. The consulting business I'd built in our kitchen had eventually sold to a major corporation for more money than my children could imagine. Now, after tonight's humiliation, it was time for them to learn the truth. Over the next few weeks, I began documenting everything. Every conversation, every dismissive comment, every time my children made excuses to avoid visiting their poor father. During my weekly call with Hayden, I mentioned feeling lonely in my little house. "Dad, you really should think about moving somewhere more social," Hayden said. "Kelly and I were just saying how isolated you must feel in that area. Where do you think I should move?" I asked innocently. "Well, there's a nice senior community about 20 minutes from us. They have activities, meal plans, transportation services. Perfect for someone in your situation. Someone in my situation." I wrote that down. Ashley was even more direct during our next conversation. "Dad, I need to be honest with you," she said. "Connor's firm is very image conscious. When clients ask about family, I have to be careful what I share. It's just easier if we keep our gatherings at our place." Brandon provided the most ammunition during his next visit. He actually came to my house, but only because his car needed work and my mechanic was nearby. As he walked through my front door, Brandon looked around like he was entering a museum. "Dad, this place is so old-fashioned," he said, running his finger along my oak dining table. "Don't you want something more modern? Open concept, smart home features." He spent the next hour explaining real estate markets, home values, and strategic property choices to his supposedly clueless father. He even offered to help me find something more suitable in my price range. "I mean, I know you're not working anymore," Brandon said, "but they're nice little condos for people on fixed incomes. Nothing to be ashamed of." The most valuable information came from Hayden's wife, Kelly, who apparently thought I was too old to understand social media. During a family birthday party, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. "Oh, Brett? Hayden's dad?" "Yeah, he's sweet but kind of pathetic. Lives in this tiny house in a sketchy area. Hayden sends him money sometimes, but you know how older people are, they get stuck in their ways." But the final piece came from Ashley's husband, Connor. During that same birthday party, I overheard him talking to another guest about his law practice. "Image is everything in this business," Connor said. "My wife's family is, well, they're good people, but they're not exactly our social level. Her father lives in this rundown neighborhood. We have to be careful about mixing business and family." That night, I went home and organized all my notes. My children weren't just embarrassed by my lifestyle. They were actively ashamed of me. They saw me as a burden, a charity case, someone to hide from their sophisticated friends. But they were about to learn the truth about their embarrassing father. The beauty of being underestimated is that nobody sees you coming. For weeks, I had watched my children dismiss me as an out-of-touch old man living beyond his means. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who had built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch. In my corporate days, I specialized in strategic planning and competitive analysis. Now, I was going to use those same skills on my own children. Step 1. Let them commit publicly to their position. I called Hayden and asked him to help me explore my options for moving somewhere more appropriate. Hayden was thrilled. Within days, he had set up appointments at 3 different senior living communities. "Dad, I think you're going to love these places," Hayden said as we drove to the first location. "They're designed for people in your situation, affordable, social, and safe." At the first community, Hayden spoke to the sales representative like I wasn't even there. "My father is on a limited budget," Hayden explained. "He's been living in an older neighborhood, but it's time for him to downsize. What's your most economical option?" I watched Hayden negotiate on my behalf, trying to get me the cheapest possible apartment. Step 2. Set the trap. I told my children I had decided to sell my house and move to assisted living. They were overjoyed, but here's where it got interesting. When I mentioned putting the house on the market, Hayden immediately volunteered to handle the sale. "Dad, real estate is complicated. Let me take care of everything. I'll make sure you get a fair price." Within a week, Hayden had brought in his buddy Ashton, a real estate agent who specialized in quick sales for motivated sellers. Ashton took one look at my neighborhood and quoted a price of $180,000. "The market's tough for older properties," Ashton explained, "but I can move this fast, get you cash in 30 days. They were trying to buy my $2 million property for less than $200,000. But I wasn't done yet. The real masterpiece was still to come. What they didn't know was that I had already contacted the Willowbrook Estates Neighborhood Association about hosting our annual charity auction at my house this year. The auction was a massive event that drew the city's most influential residents, judges, politicians, business leaders, and social elite. I had volunteered to host the event as a memorial tribute to Patricia. The association was thrilled. My house, with its 4 acres and historic charm, was perfect for a high-end fundraising event. The date was set for Christmas Eve. The same day my children traditionally came for our family celebration. I sent out the invitations with a special note. "Please join us for our annual charity auction, hosted by Brett and the late Patricia Blakey, the Willowbrook Estates residents." Then I called my children with the Christmas Eve invitation, not mentioning the little party I'd be hosting. Just a quiet family gathering at the old house, I told them. One last Christmas before I move. They were about to discover that their charity case father was hosting the most exclusive social event of the season. Christmas Eve morning arrived with perfect weather. By noon, the catering trucks were arriving. Not just any caterers. I had hired the same company that handled events for the governor's mansion. "Mr. Mitchell," the head caterer said as her team began setting up, "the auction items are arriving at 2 o'clock. Where'd you like us to display them?" "The main parlor will work perfectly," I said. At 1:30, my neighbor Judge Rebecca Thompson stopped by to check on the preparations. "Brett, this is going to be wonderful," she said, admiring the elegant setup. "Patricia would be so proud." At 2 o'clock, the first auction guests began arriving. Within an hour, my driveway was full of luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, and vehicles worth more than my children's annual salaries. I watched from my front window as Mayor Helen Carrick stepped out of her car, followed by 3 city council members, the police chief, and half a dozen business leaders I'd known for years. At 3:30, my phone rang. "Dad, we're running a bit late," Hayden said. "Traffic is crazy on your street. There are cars everywhere." "Oh, that's just some neighborhood activity," I said casually. "Come to the front door when you get here." At 4 o'clock, I saw Hayden's SUV turn onto my street. Through my window, I watched him drive slowly, looking confused at all the expensive cars. He parked 3 blocks away, the closest spot he could find. I opened my front door just as Hayden, Ashley, Brandon, Kelly, and Connor walked up my driveway. They all looked bewildered. "Dad, what's going on?" Ashley asked, staring at the valet stand near my garage. "Whose cars are all these?" "Oh, we're hosting a little charity event," I said cheerfully. Come in, come in. Everyone's excited to meet you." The moment they stepped inside, their jaws dropped. My modest living room had been transformed into an elegant auction gallery. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over displays of expensive artwork and luxury items. Well-dressed people moved through the rooms, champagne glasses in hand, examining auction pieces and chatting quietly. "Brett," Mayor Carrick approached us with a warm smile. "These must be your children. I've heard so much about them." Hayden stood frozen as the mayor shook his hand. Ashley looked like she'd seen a ghost. Connor's face had gone completely pale. "Children, this is Mayor Carrick," I said proudly. "Helen, this is Hayden, Ashley, and Brandon, along with Hayden's wife Kelly and Ashley's husband Connor." Before my children could respond, Judge Thompson appeared at my elbow. "Brett, the auction committee is ready for your opening remarks," she said. Then she turned to my children with a smile. "You must be so proud of your father. He's donated more to local charities than anyone in Willowbrook Estates." Ashley's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Willowbrook Estates. Oh yes, dear," Judge Thompson said. "Didn't your father tell you? This is one of the most prestigious addresses in the state." That's when Connor finally found his voice and proved he was exactly as shallow as I thought. "Excuse me," Connor said, pulling out his phone. "I need to make a call." I watched Connor step aside and frantically dial his office. Within seconds, I could hear him talking in urgent whispers. While Connor had his meltdown, Ashley grabbed my arm. "Dad, I don't understand. This house, this neighborhood, these people, it's beautiful, isn't it?" I said calmly. "Your mother loved hosting events here." Hayden was staring around the room like he'd landed on Mars. "Dad, how long have you lived in Willowbrook Estates?" 22 years, I said. "We bought this house just before you graduated high school." Brandon looked like he was going to be sick. "This whole time, you've been living in Willowbrook Estates." That's when my neighbor, Dr. Michael Patterson, joined our conversation. "Brett, beautiful setup tonight," Dr. Patterson said, clapping me on the shoulder. "I was just telling my wife that your place is still the crown jewel of the neighborhood. For acres in Willowbrook, you couldn't buy a property like this today for less than $3 million. The room went dead silent around my children. $3 million, Ashley whispered. Connor had finished his phone call and returned to the group just in time to hear Dr. Patterson's assessment. His face was white as snow. "I have to go," Connor said abruptly. "Ashley, we're leaving. Now." But I wasn't done yet. "Actually," I said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "I'd love everyone to meet my children." Hayden here was just telling me how concerned he's been about my living situation. Several nearby guests turned to listen, including 2 partners from Connor's law firm. In fact, I continued, Hayden even found a nice assisted living facility for me. He's been working so hard to help me downsize from this terrible burden of a house. Dr. Patterson looked confused. "Downsize? Brett, this is one of the most desirable properties in the city. Why would you possibly want to leave?" I smiled at my son. "Hayden, why don't you explain to Dr. Patterson why you think I should move?" Hayden looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Every eye in the room was on him, waiting for his answer. My children had spent months telling me how embarrassed they were by my poor lifestyle. Now they were standing in a room full of judges, politicians, and business leaders, discovering that their charity case father was actually one of the wealthiest, most respected residents in the most exclusive neighborhood in the state. What happened next was pure poetry. Hayden stammered, looking around at the sea of important faces waiting for his response. "I just want what's best for Dad." Dr. Patterson smiled kindly. "Of course, Brett is lucky to have such caring children. But I have to say, leaving Willowbrook would be a tremendous loss. Brett and Patricia were founding members of our community charity board." Connor tugged desperately at Ashley's arm. "We really need to go," he whispered urgently. But it was too late. The partners from Connor's law firm had already approached our group. "Connor," said William Barnes, senior partner at Barnes, Fletcher and Associates. "What a surprise to see you here. I didn't know you knew Brett." Ashley stepped forward automatically. "Actually, Brett is my father." William Barnes' eyes lit up. "Your father? How wonderful." "Connor, you never mentioned your father-in-law was Brett Mitchell. You know my dad?" Ashley asked weakly. Know him? Brett's consulting firm handled our biggest merger 5 years ago. Brilliant strategist. And of course, everyone in the legal community knows about his philanthropy work. Connor looked like he was having a heart attack. Mr. Barnes, I can explain. Explain what? Barnes interrupted. You should be proud. Brett's reputation in the business community is impeccable. When he sold his consulting firm, it was the deal of the decade. That's when my children learned another little fact I'd neglected to mention. Judge Thompson had been listening to the conversation with interest. Oh yes, she said, Brett's business success is well known around here. Most people who sell their companies for that kind of money become insufferable. But Brett stayed humble. Brandon finally found his voice. Dad, sold his company? $8.5 million. Judge Thompson said cheerfully. It was in all the business journals. The color drained from Hayden's face. $8.5 million. That's when Mayor Carrick rejoined our group, carrying a champagne glass and beaming. Brett, I have wonderful news, she announced. The auction has already raised $40,000, and we're only halfway through. She turned to my children with sparkling eyes. Your parents were the heart and soul of this community. When Patricia passed, we thought Brett might move away, but thankfully he stayed. I took the microphone from the auction coordinator and looked out over the crowded room. 200 of the most influential people in the state had gathered in my embarrassing house. Friends, I began, Patricia and I moved to Willowbrook 22 years ago because we wanted to be part of a community that valued character over cash, service over status. I paused and looked directly at my children. Patricia always said that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch and the legacy you leave. She believed that how we treat people, especially when we think nobody important is watching, reveals who we really are. The room was completely silent. I want to thank my children for being here tonight, I said, still holding the microphone. Hayden, Ashley, and Brandon have taught me so much about the importance of appearances and social status. They've spent months helping me understand why my home isn't suitable for successful people like themselves. Several guests turned to look at my children with puzzled expressions. In fact, I continued, Hayden has been working very hard to help me sell this house and move somewhere more appropriate for someone in my financial situation. He even found a buyer willing to pay $180,000 for this property. Dr. Patterson nearly choked on his champagne. $180,000? For 4 acres in Willowbrook. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Thompson stepped forward. Brett, surely there's been some mistake. No mistake, I said calmly. My son Hayden brought in a real estate agent who assured me that $180,000 was a fair price for my older property in this declining neighborhood. The silence was deafening. 200 wealthy, sophisticated people stared at Hayden in complete disbelief. That's when Connor finally cracked. Ashley, we're leaving right now, he hissed. But William Barnes stepped into their path. Connor, I think we need to talk, Barnes said quietly. Several of our clients are here tonight, and they've heard some very interesting things. Connor's career was evaporating before his eyes, but I delivered the final blow. Don't worry, I announced to the room. I've decided not to sell after all. My children will just have to find other ways to build their wealth. The message was clear. My children wouldn't be inheriting this property or anything else from their embarrassing father. The room erupted in supportive applause. But my children just stood there, realizing that their greed and shame had cost them everything. The weeks following the Christmas Eve auction brought consequences my children never saw coming. Word travels fast in professional circles, especially when it involves someone trying to defraud their own parent. Connor was the first to face the music. Within 48 hours, William Barnes called him into a private meeting. Connor, Barnes said, we've had several clients express concerns about your judgment and character. The Henderson family has specifically requested that you be removed from their account. Sir, I can explain, Connor began. The explanation is simple, Barnes interrupted. You were ashamed of your father-in-law because you thought he was poor. When you discovered he was wealthy and respected, you tried to leave immediately. Our clients saw everything. By Friday, Connor had been reassigned to research duties, no more client contact, no more path to partnership. His legal career was effectively over. Ashley called me in tears. Dad, Connor's been demoted. Please, can you call his partners and explain? Explain what? I asked calmly. That we didn't mean it. That we love you. Ashley, I record our conversations. Would you like me to play them for Connor's partners? The one where you said you couldn't be seen in my neighborhood. Hayden faced a different kind of punishment. His buddy Ashton, the agent who tried to buy my house for $180,000, was now under investigation by the state real estate board for fraud. Dad, Ashton says you set us up, Hayden said during an awkward phone call. Hayden, I've lived in Willowbrook Estates for over 20 years. Of course I know what my house is worth. The question is, why didn't you? We thought you were struggling financially by stealing $2 million from me. Hayden couldn't answer that. But the real revelation came when I had my lawyer review all the financial help I'd given my children. College tuition, house down payments, emergency loans. I had given my 3 children nearly $400,000 over the past decade. None of it had been repaid. My lawyer was fascinated. Brett, legally speaking, you could demand immediate repayment of all these gifts. Hayden would have to pay back $180,000 immediately. Ashley owes $120,000. Brandon owes $95,000. The irony was beautiful. My children, who thought I was poor, actually owed me enough money to destroy their financial lives. The most satisfying consequence came from my grandchildren. Hayden's kids had overheard conversations at school about the big party at Grandpa Brett's mansion. Dad, 10-year-old Zoe asked Hayden, "Why did you tell us Grandpa was poor?" My friend's mom says Grandpa Brett is famous for helping charities, 8-year-old Ashton added. Hayden and Kelly found themselves explaining to their own children why they had been ashamed of one of the most respected men in the community. But the final twist came when I received a phone call from the Willowbrook Estates Neighborhood Association. "Brett," said Association President Margaret Williams, "we've had several residents ask about what happened at your auction. Your son Hayden called our security office last month. He claimed there had been a mistake with your residency status." My blood ran cold. He said he was concerned about your mental state and your ability to afford the association fees. Margaret continued. He suggested we might need to review your membership status. Hayden had tried to get me evicted from my own neighborhood before trying to steal my house. Within days, the story had spread throughout Willowbrook Estates. The neighborhood that had embraced me for 20 years was now disgusted by my children's behavior. My children had wanted to play status games. Now they were learning that true status comes from character, not money. And their character had been found severely lacking. 3 weeks after the auction, all 3 of my children showed up at my door unannounced. I could see them through the window, standing nervously on my front porch like children caught stealing cookies. "Hayden, Ashley, Brandon," I said calmly as I opened the door. "What a surprise." "Dad, we need to talk," Hayden said, his voice strained. They filed into my living room and perched on the edge of the sofa like students waiting for discipline. Ashley spoke first. "Dad, we know you're angry, and you have every right to be. We handled everything badly." "Badly?" I repeated. "Ashley, you told your husband's colleagues that I was an embarrassment to your family." "I was wrong," Ashley said quickly. "I was stupid and shallow, and I'm sorry." Brandon jumped in. "Dad, we didn't understand the situation. We thought you were struggling. By calling the neighborhood association to question my residency status?" I asked quietly. Hayden's face went white. "How did you? Hayden, did you really think you could have me investigated without me finding out? In a neighborhood where I've lived for 22 years. Dad, I was worried about you," Hayden said desperately. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Worried about me? Hayden, I built an $8 million business. I think I can handle a monthly association fee." "We know that now," Ashley said. "We know we were wrong about everything." "Do you?" I leaned forward. "Ashley, tell me, what exactly were you wrong about?" Ashley looked confused. We misjudged your financial situation." "That's not what you were wrong about," I said firmly. "Your mistake wasn't thinking I was poor. Your mistake was treating me badly because you thought I was poor." The room fell silent. If I had actually been struggling financially, would that have made me less worthy of your love and respect? Hayden opened his mouth to answer, but I held up my hand. Hayden, you try to have me evicted from my own neighborhood. Ashley, you refuse to let your children visit their grandfather. Brandon, you lecture me about investments while planning to steal my property. I stood up and walked to the window. The saddest part is that you never once asked if I was actually struggling. You just assumed, and then used that assumption to justify treating me like a burden. Brandon was crying now. Dad, we love you. You love what I can give you, I said. You've proven that money matters more to you than family. Ashley broke down completely. Dad, please, tell us how to fix this. I walked back to my chair. For a long moment, I studied their faces. You want to know how to fix this? I asked finally. They nodded eagerly. You can't, I said simply. The words hit them like a physical blow. For months, you planned to steal nearly $2 million from your own father. You did all of this while spending money I gave you. Hayden, your house down payment came from me. Ashley, Connor's law school loans were paid with my money. Brandon, you're driving a car I bought. I stood up and moved toward the front door. I raised you to value character over cash. You learned none of those lessons. Instead, you learned to value appearances over substance, money over family, status over character. I opened the front door. The financial support stops today, I said firmly. The emergency loans, the bailouts, the gifts, all of it. You're adults now. Figure out yourselves. What about the grandchildren? Ashley asked, tears streaming. That question hit harder than expected. The grandchildren are welcome here anytime, I said. But they'll come alone. I won't have them learning that love is conditional on bank account balances. I stepped back inside and began to close the door. Dad, wait. Brandon called out. What do we have to do? I paused with the door half closed. Figure out who you want to be, I said. Then become that person. Maybe someday, when you're older and wiser, we can try again. I closed the door and listened to their footsteps fade down my driveway. 6 months later, I was tending to Patricia's memorial garden when I heard small voices at my front gate. Grandpa Brett, Grandpa Brett. I looked up to see Zoe and Ashton, Hayden's kids, pressing their faces against the entrance to my property. Behind them stood a woman I didn't recognize. Hello, Zoe. Hello, Ashton, I said warmly. Who's your friend? This is Mrs. Patterson, Zoe said excitedly. She's our new babysitter. Mrs. Patterson smiled apologetically. Mr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry to bother you. The children saw your house and insisted they knew you. I unlocked the gate. Would you like to come in for some cookies? Their faces lit up immediately. For the next hour, I gave Zoe and Ashton the tour they'd never been allowed to have. They marveled at the big backyard, the library, and the pictures of their grandmother throughout the house. Grandpa, Zoe said as we sat eating cookies, why doesn't Daddy bring us here anymore? Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable, but I appreciated the question's honesty. Zoe, sometimes adults make mistakes, I said carefully. And sometimes those mistakes hurt people's feelings so badly that it takes a long time to fix them. Did Daddy hurt your feelings? Yes, he did. Did you hurt his feelings too? I considered the question seriously. I think I did, Ashton. I think I showed your daddy some things about himself that he didn't want to see. That's how my new life began. Within a month, Zoe and Ashton were visiting every Saturday. Mrs. Patterson, who turned out to be a lovely widow named Carol, often stayed for coffee. Through Carol, I learned about my children's lives. Connor had been let go from his law firm. Hayden was facing professional difficulties. Brandon had moved back in with his ex-girlfriend after struggling with his mortgage. But I also learned something more important. My grandchildren were asking hard questions about wealth, character, and family loyalty. Zoe had asked Hayden why they couldn't visit the mansion anymore. These children were learning lessons about consequences. A year after the auction, Judge Thompson invited me to join the Willowbrook Estates Board of Directors. Brett, this community needs your wisdom, she said. I accepted and used the position to establish a scholarship fund in Patricia's name for students who demonstrate exceptional character, regardless of their family's financial situation. On the second anniversary of the auction, Carol brought me an unexpected visitor. Brett, she said, there's someone here to see you. I looked up from my gardening to see Brandon standing at my gate. He looked older, more mature, somehow smaller. "Hi, Dad," he said quietly. I stood up and brushed dirt from my hands. "Brandon, could we talk?" I unlocked the gate and led him to the garden bench Patricia had loved. "Dad, I know I don't deserve your time," Brandon began, "but I needed you to know that I understand now. What we did was unforgivable." I waited for him to continue. "I lost the house," Brandon said simply. "Without your help, I couldn't make payments. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment now, working 2 jobs. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. "No, Dad, don't be sorry. I needed to lose it. I needed to understand what it's like to struggle, to feel insecure about where you live." Brandon looked out at the gardens. "For the first time in my life, I understand what we put you through," he continued. "The shame, the judgment, the assumption that you weren't good enough because of where you lived. I was so arrogant, Dad, so blind to my own privilege." "What do you want from me, Brandon?" "Nothing," he said immediately. "I'm not here for money or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally learned the lessons you tried to teach me. Character matters more than cash. Family loyalty is more valuable than status." For the first time in 2 years, I saw a glimpse of the child I'd raised. "Brandon, what you did was wrong. But learning from mistakes is how we grow." "I know I can't undo what I did," Brandon said. "But I promise, I'll never again judge someone based on their address or bank account. And if I ever have children, I'll teach them that their grandfather was a good man who tried to raise his children right." We sat in silence, watching the birds in Patricia's garden. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" I asked finally. Brandon's eyes filled with tears. "I like that very much." As we walked toward the house, I thought about the journey we'd all taken. My children had learned the hardest lesson of all, that character and values can't be bought, but they can be lost. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. I still live in my embarrassing house in Willowbrook Estates. My grandchildren visit every Saturday, and Brandon comes for dinner once a month. Hayden and Ashley send Christmas cards, but haven't visited yet. Maybe someday they will. The scholarship fund in Patricia's name has helped dozens of young people attend college. The Willowbrook Estates community continues to thrive as a place where character matters more than bank accounts. And I've learned that sometimes the most valuable lesson you can teach is that actions have consequences, even when the lesson costs everyone more than they expected to pay. Some stories don't have happy endings, but they all have lessons. And sometimes the lesson is the most important part.
If this story got you thinking, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that hit deep, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this one, share it with them. Thanks for watching.